KPBS On Demand is supported by Paint Care, offering households and businesses in California more than 800 leftover paint drop-off sites for recycling. Quantities of 100-plus gallons of paint may qualify for a large volume pickup. Learn more at paintcare.org.
Bond. James Bond. My obsession with 007 began before I even started kindergarten. I remember using dolls to act out scenes from Russia with Love and had a secret agent doll with an exploding attaché case. I played my Goldfinger album so many times that my parents eventually hid it. Welcome back to the KPBS Cinema Junkie podcast. I'm Beth Accomando, and today it's all about Bond. My favorite Bond remains the one I grew up with, Sean Connery. And if I could get one wish granted, it would be to have Sean Connery star in On Her Majesty's Secret Service rather than George Lazenby. Then I struggled with the cartoonishness of the Roger Moore Bonds, loved Timothy Dalton as the interim Bond while the franchise waited for the bland Pierce Brosnan to free himself of his TV obligations. So when Daniel Craig took on the role of James Bond in 2006 in the reboot of the franchise, I was hopeful but concerned. But Casino Royale turned out to be a masterful reboot, setting Bond into a grittier new modern world and giving us a bit of backstory on the agent with a license to kill. The franchise slipped a bit with the next entry, Quantum of Solace, but regained its footing with Skyfall. Now the latest Bond hits the screen amid much anticipation. When the title of the 24th Bond was announced, it delighted fans because of the memory the name evoked.
Its name is SPECTRE.
Ah, SPECTRE, the acronym for Special Executive for Counterintelligence, Terrorism, Revenge, and Extortion, Ian Fleming's fictional global crime syndicate and terrorist organization. As Bond heads out on his latest adventure, he finds his first clues to SPECTRE in Mexico, where things get a little out of hand.
What's going on, James? There's not one person at MI6 who isn't talking about it.
Talking about what, exactly?
That what you did in Mexico was one step too far. That you're finished.
What do you think?
I think you're just getting started.
Well, more like continuing where he left off, as this current series of Bond films pursues an ambitious, overarching story arc across what is a planned 5 films. Ever since Daniel Craig took over the role of 007, the Bond franchise has been moving toward a more grounded, John le Carré-style spy thriller, and away from the cartoony gadgets of the Roger Moore era. So SPECTRE begins with a sense of modern espionage, trying to clean the relics out of its closet.
And in light of the new information I've given him, he's decided to close down the 00 program with immediate effect.
You don't know what you're doing.
It's not personal. It's the future. And you're not.
You're a cocky little bastard, aren't you?
I'll take that as a compliment.
I wouldn't. This isn't over yet.
But the move towards realism is a bit tricky because they don't want to completely walk away from all the fun stuff. So there'll be talky scenes of backroom politics and modern espionage. But then Bond will do something outrageous with effortless grace and give a suave wink to the camera as if to say the old Bond is not completely gone. But as the films strive for a more and more grounded world for Bond to play in, these moments are harder to pull off smoothly. But then there are moments when everything comes together perfectly. Take a fight on a train between Bond and a henchman named Hinks, played by Dave Bautista. The scene recalls a fight in From Russia with Love between Sean Connery and Robert Shaw, so the film gets points for paying homage to its roots. And Hinks recalls the iconic Odd Job from Goldfinger, so more geek points. It's also well staged within a confined setting and mixes brutal action with occasional levity. Everything about this sequence is great. Unlike the action and helicopter stunts that open the film and display some bad CGI and green screen. I do, however, miss that the villains no longer seem to have grand schemes like robbing Fort Knox, but rather something more nebulous and sinister, like controlling global technology. But fortunately, some things, like Bond's banter with evil masterminds, never quite goes away.
So, James, why did you come?
I came here to kill you.
And I thought you came here to die.
Well, it's all a matter of perspective.
I don't want to reveal any spoilers, so all I'll say is that Christoph Waltz, although underused, is great as a villain who sets us up for the next film that will supposedly bring this particular story arc to a close and end Craig's contract as Bond. Then the franchise will have to deal with demands for a black Bond after the whole Idris Elba hoopla. Writer Anthony Horowitz was quoted as saying Elba was too street, and people went crazy. Personally, I think casting a black actor as Bond is just stunt casting to get attention and pretend that the franchise is more hip. Bond is who he is, and he's a product of a certain time. And I don't think casting a black actor as Bond works. But what would work is to have Craig's 007 hand the reins over to a new 00 agent who could be black or Asian or Indian, and who wouldn't have the baggage of Ian Fleming's literary character, but who could take the franchise in a bold new direction. That I would be excited to see. And I think the franchise is strong enough to make a move like that and stray away from the core stories of Ian Fleming. But Craig is signed on to play Bond one more time, and the way this film ended, he absolutely has to stay in order to bring this story arc to a close. The pulling together of all the films is impressive, but sometimes it means there's a lot of explaining to do, and that can slow the pace down and feel convoluted and forced. But overall, the overarching storyline is proving successful. Spectre is a sleek, stylish entry in the modern Bond films. There's less action, more exposition, and a kind of maturing sensibility. It's a solid, serious spy film, but still manages to maintain a playful glint in its eye. And for the rest of the show, I'm pulling out an archive from the Geek Roundtable that I did when Skyfall had just come out. I gathered a couple of friends that I knew were devout Bond fans, and I start the program with a montage of clips and people attending a preview screening of Skyfall.
Shall we get started?
Mr.
Bond.
Oh, yes. Mr. Bond.
My name's Bond. James Bond.
My name is Bond. James Bond.
The name's Bond. James Bond.
The name's Bond. James Bond.
I like how long the franchise has been going. That's pretty awesome to be able to see all those different iterations of Roger Moore and Sean Connery, things like that.
They define what every young boy wants to be when they grow up.
Lots of guns, lots of gadgets, lots of babes.
My name is Pussy Galore.
I must be dreaming.
We just saw James Bond, the Skyfall, and it was pretty awesome.
Daniel Craig, dude, he's the man.
007 reporting for duty.
Just the fact that he's so visceral and physical with the role.
The cars. Definitely the cars.
You'll be using this Aston Martin DB5.
One thing that is key to a great Bond movie is a villain that's very theatrical.
Mommy was very bad.
You know, you watch Bond, you're gonna watch something classy, you're gonna have an Aston Martin there, you're gonna have a good time.
Oh, don't worry. 007 always comes back.
Those were Bond fans Eric Ruggles, Carlos Angel, David Palm, Aaron McKee, and Alex Neskovich. For the Bond Show today, I wanted to bring in two people who could geek out about Bond in the same way I do. And I want to let them introduce themselves. First of all the way from Wales.
I'm Jones, Aled Jones.
My name is Tateishi, Rami Tateishi.
And we're here to talk Bond. So the new Bond has rebooted the franchise, which is actually kind of interesting because they could have easily rested on their laurels. Bond is one of the most successful and long-running franchises. They could have kept doing exactly what they had been doing. So it's kind of nice that they gambled a little bit. We just had Bond 23, Skyfall, open this past weekend. So I just want to start off by asking both of you, what was your impression of Skyfall? Aled, what did you think?
Personally, I thought it was the best Bond movie for quite a while.
And Rami, what did you think?
I thought it was great too, and I think exactly along the lines that Aled just said. It's the best one that there's been for a long time, yeah.
Who was kind of the first Bond that you guys grew up with or saw?
The first James Bond movie I saw was The Spy Who Loved Me, and that was in the theater in 1977 or 78, around there, and I just thought it was the greatest thing I'd ever seen. I'd never seen this kind of action spy thriller thing done on that scale.
Definitely, when I was growing up, for me, Roger Moore was Bond. I don't quite remember what was the first one I saw, but I remember my father coming home one evening with a VHS recorder, and so he came home around 10 p.m. at night, and it was a school night, and I was only like 11, and he actually called the video store owner because he knew him, and he opened the store for me at 10 o'clock at night, and I went in, and I rented Octopussy. That was the thing I wanted most to see.
Goldfinger was the first one I saw, and I loved those movies. I mean, they had action. They went all over the world to shoot scenes. What is it for you that kind of defines the Bond experience and makes it something that's so much fun to return to?
I think it is that sense of it's the first, well, at least when I think back to The Spy Who Loved Me, it was the first time that you saw this kind of action-adventure kind of spy thing that you're used to seeing, like on TV, Mission Impossible or Man from U.N.C.L.E. or these kinds of things. But to spend that much money on it and have like a big lavish production where they could really go for it and have like real great car chases and just spectacular action scenes, I think that's it. Sort of the, if you want to call it the grandeur or the opulence of staging this kind of production, this kind of spy story, with spending that kind of money on it and just really going for it and making it look terrific.
When you boil it down, for me, it's no matter who's playing Bond, even, whether you like Pierce Brosnan, and even George Lazenby, the fact is, you want to be Bond when you're watching the Bond movies. This is it for me. I mean, you want to inhabit that universe, you want to have those adventures, and the film really sells that to you, and I think it's just awesome.
This is the third outing for Daniel Craig as Bond. And back in 2006, Casino Royale really gave the franchise a reboot. Tell me how it kind of refocused it or gave kind of a revitalization to the franchise.
With Pierce Brosnan, things had got very, very camp and extremely hard to endure, I think, for fans. And Casino Royale just brought things back to being a more classic Ian Fleming Bond, I think. Things were slightly harsher, the character was darker, and Craig embodies that.
And Rami, how did it kind of reboot the storyline in terms of we were getting kind of a backstory to Bond?
It was a strange sort of rebooting in that it carried over, well, the one character, M, his superior, but it was, in essence, rebooting the Bond character. So you started anew and you saw him learning to become the James Bond that we knew, picking up the characteristics of Bond as the movie went on.
Some people didn't like what Daniel Craig brought to it, but this is also kind of a return to the more literary Bond, isn't it?
It definitely is a return to the more literary Bond, in my opinion. If anybody who's read the books, Bond is an extremely tortured character to a certain extent, and Daniel Craig really gets that.
I'm talking with Aled Jones, owner of Moviedrome DVD in Wales, and Rami Tataishi, assistant professor of English and film studies at National University. One of the things that's very signature about Bond is the Bond theme. It's something that has been consistent through all these 23 Bond films. Rami, you're a musician, and tell me, is there something unique about this theme or something that makes it special?
Well, there's sort of two themes that comprise the James Bond theme, the two melodies. The key melodies are first the very staccato guitar first half, which is that part, and then the second half is that part. Both of those themes are overlaid on top of, this is what I think is like a really unique part of it, is the ostinato. An ostinato was like a repeated phrase. It serves kind of like a foundation for a melody. And that foundation is something very simple for the James Bond theme. It's just 3 notes over and over again. It's these notes. And it's just that same sequence. But something brilliant that the composer, John Barry, did in arranging those 3 very simple notes was that it's not just those 3 notes. He did kind of this call and response thing where he added this little punch after each note, so that instead of just this, we get this. See, now we got something different there. We got something different going on that adds this kind of relentless driving quality that really sort of helps to push the theme along, which is really cool. So we got this now. We'll put the theme over that.
I can't hear those notes and not want to go grab a Bond movie off my DVD shelf.
Absolutely. And the thing about Skyfall that's amazing is you get the ending, in a sense, that is the beginning, and you get to hear that like pounding in the cinema right at the end. And it's fantastic.
And Casino Royale did something similar too, where at the very end, when he finally, you go through this whole movie, and one of the trademarks is how he says he introduces himself as Bond, James Bond. In Casino Royale, you don't get that until the very end. It's the last line, and then boom, you're struck with that theme, and it's just great. It's very iconic.
Aled, for you, one of the things that defines a Bond movie is the Bond villain, and you specifically have something you're looking for from a Bond villain. So tell me what that is.
The Bond villain, for me, always has an awesome scheme, and not only does he have this scheme, but he spends at least 4 or 5 minutes detailing the scheme to us, the audience, and his co-conspirators, in a sense.
This is my bank, the gold depository at Fort Knox, gentlemen. In its vaults are $15 billion.
You think of Goldfinger, of course, as the classic example of this, when he has the rumpus room that transform into his scheme room.
Man has climbed Mount Everest, gone to the bottom of the ocean, He has fired rockets to the moon, split the atom, achieved miracles in every field of human endeavor, except crime.
And then, of course, after explaining the scheme in detail, Goldfinger kills everyone.
Now, Bond films are also known, of course, for the babes. From Dr. No with Ursula Andress emerging from the surf. They're something that really define what these films are. Do you have a favorite Bond babe?
My favorite really is Tatiana Romanova from Russia with Love. That was Daniela Bianchi, who was, I think she was a Miss Italy runner-up. Her voice was completely dubbed over in the film because I guess her accent. But there was just something about her just being an innocent, regular person caught up in this whole crazy scheme that she played really well, I thought.
For me, it would be maybe another slightly off-kilter choice, but it would be Diana Rigg in On Her Majesty's Secret Service. I think if you love the Avengers, you know about Diana Rigg. She was also extremely feisty as a Bond girl. Possibly the most feisty. It's just a shame that there was no chemistry between her and Lazenby. You think, to a sense, what might have been, but she really had it down for me, and she was just absolutely superb in the role.
She was fabulous. For me, I think because maybe Goldfinger was the first one I saw, but I love Pussy Galore. Honor Blackman, who also was in The Avengers. She was in that before Diana Rigg. First of all, she gets to have this porn star name.
It's a great name, yeah.
It's a great name. It is a great name.
One of the things I actually liked about the Bond girls, Bond gets a bad rap for being a chauvinist and for being misogynistic. But if you look at some of the women, like Pussy Galore, like Diana Rigg's character, Pussy Galore ran her own fleet of airplanes. She actually bested Bond a couple times, flipping him and, delivering a few karate chops. She was pretty feisty herself. So to me, although, they are set in their particular time and women are not necessarily depicted that well. I know in Goldfinger 2, Dink gets this little slap on the butt and told, man talk, go away. But for the top Bond girls, they had something special, I think.
You tend to look at Bond girls as being furniture to a certain extent. So it's nice when they have something a little bit extra to bring to it.
And they cast them pretty well, too. There were a lot of very hot women.
Yeah, there's no shortage of hotness in Bond. Even you look at Spy Who Loved Me, Barbara Bach, who, not the best actress, but she's so ridiculously beautiful that you kind of forget about how a little bit wooden it is. But yeah, there's no shortage of hotness going on.
Okay, the Bond girls we've been talking about have all been the women that Bond pairs up with. And generally, if they start off bad, they turn around because of him. Pussy Galore ends up helping him instead of helping Goldfinger achieve his scheme. But I do want to mention one Bond villainess who is my absolute favorite from Thunderball, Fiona, who's played by Luciana Paluzzi. And I want to play this clip from her in the film because she is one of the only Bond women that Bond does not turn around to his side.
But of course, I forgot your ego, Mr. Bond. James Bond, who only has to make love to a woman and she starts to hear heavenly choir singing. She repents and immediately returns to the side of right and virtue. But not this one.
I'd agree with you. She is the ultimate Bond villainess in a sense. Because A, doesn't turn her, you're absolutely right. But more than that, she is Spectre through and through. She is not even any interest in joining Bond in any way. And also, she has a fantastic exit in the movie. But the thing for me that's important about her more than anything else is just her physicality. She's just stunning to look at. It's amazing.
It's like she's a female counterpart to Bond in being just the character that owns that role, does things his or her own way.
We talked about the schemes of Bond's villains, but who is your favorite Bond villain?
I think Goldfinger is definitely the most iconic James Bond villain and probably who I pick as my favorite, but one that I want to mention who, I don't know if it's a different definition of the word favorite, but Katanga from Live and Let Die. His scheme is to release all these free drugs and this is somehow going to take down all of the other families. Just kind of doesn't make sense, but it's amazing that the film just runs with this and kind of, just it's like the Casablanca thing where you just keep pushing at it, and because of the pacing, you don't have time to stop and think about it.
For me, I think my favorite Bond villain, simply because of who he is Francisco Scaramanga, and that is because it is Christopher Lee. For me, having grown up with Hammer, being British, Lee is an icon of the cinema, and he is built to be a Bond villain. It might not be the greatest Bond movie, but he's so charismatic in the part. And he is a complete sociopath, almost of the bad M type to a certain extent. He wants kind of Bond to show him respect. And I just think he's amazing in the film.
The one Bond villain, and he's not really the head villain, is Oddjob. From Goldfinger, he's got the hat with the metal rim that he tosses and can break someone's neck. And he doesn't have a single word in the whole movie. And to me, he was just so iconic and so great. I do adore Oddjob from Goldfinger. I'm talking with Aled Jones, owner of Moviedrome DVD in Wales, and Rami Tataishi, assistant professor of English and film studies at National University. So do you have a favorite Bond movie overall?
It's a tough call now. My classic answer is From Russia with Love, but it might be Casino Royale now, the Daniel Craig. Although I'll go back to From Russia with Love and say that was the one that really just sort of encapsulated everything. It was before it started to get too sort of outrageous with the gadgets and the campness. It was just a very straightforward, very solid sort of spy espionage story. And the thing about it is that, James Bond is really just... up until the very bitter end, you're wondering how is he gonna succeed? And there's that feeling of suspense that you don't get, I think, from a lot of Bond movies, where he became the sort of superheroic person. You were never in doubt that he was gonna save the day.
I'd agree with that entirely. From Russia with Love I think it's an exceptional Bond film. It's an extremely different Bond film to a certain extent. But standing up for Rog, I am going to say that The Spy Who Loved Me for me has everything you could possibly want in a Bond film. It really does hit every mark, and if nothing else, you should see it for the opening. And the stunt going off the mountain in that is absolutely amazing.
That's still one of my favorite moments. That ski jump in the beginning is amazing.
I mean, Lewis Gilbert talked about the premiere of it in Leicester Square, and nobody had seen it, so there was no knowledge of what was going to happen. And the minute Bond went off the mountain, there was just a collective in the audience, and then of course you get the massive parachute out, and it's actually replayed in the Olympics. That's how iconic this scene is. Daniel Craig picks up the Queen, jumps out of the plane, you get the same thing. It's completely iconic.
Now talk about an audience reaction. When we saw Skyfall together, a midnight screening at the ArcLight, there was one collective response in that film. Tell me what that was.
The Aston Martin, it is a classic moment. It is from Goldfinger. And yeah, the minute you see it, and of course, when you get in the car, there is another iconic moment with Judi Dench. It's a remarkable moment in the film.
Well, this new film, Skyfall, really plays nicely off the Bond history and kind of brings it full circle at the end. Is there a favorite moment you had from that?
For me, my favorite moment in the film, and I think it references the history to a certain extent. I mean, the car moment is fantastic, but I love it when we arrive at the island that Javier Bardem was emptied out, and then we get into the room and you have all these computers, stripped down computers. It's it's almost like a Ken Adams set to a certain extent. And then down he comes in the elevator, and then he gets to have his real Bond baddie moment.
She sent you after me knowing you're not ready, knowing you would likely die. Mommy was very bad.
And it really is an iconic moment for me for the future.
Going back to that car thing, I mean, that just stands out in my mind so clearly. It sort of doesn't make sense within the context of the film that, here's Daniel Craig, who just started with M, a couple of movies ago. So where does this Aston Martin come from? It's from Sean Connery. And so in that sense, that moment breaks through and is sort of this reference to the history of Bond, not the actual story of this Daniel Craig character. It's referencing the entirety of this franchise we've been watching.
And another thing we have to look forward to as Bond fans is they are putting together a 50th anniversary collection. Tell me what this is all about, because you have a DVD store. What's the appeal of this?
It's 50 years of Bond, if I'm right. But for the first time, we get the entire collection on Blu-ray with whole new extras and everything. And it really does look. And they've even allowed a free little slot in the package for Skyfall to put in. But of course, once we move beyond that, then that won't be the case. But it really does look like a DVD and Blu-ray set that they've poured a lot of love into. And I think fans will love it.
One of the other things that defined a lot of the Bond films are gadgets. So do you have a particular gadget that you remember and really liked?
I can think of a trio of gadgets that I really love and that I think would just be great because they're everyday items that I could I could see myself using every day. One was the grappling hook belt buckle from GoldenEye. One was the attaché case from Russia with Love that was packed with all the gadgets. And the other one is James Bond's magnetic watch from Live and Let Die that also had the buzzsaw and all kinds of neat things packed away in there.
The gadgetry moved into overdrive in Rog's years. It really did. I mean, he clearly loved that about the franchise. And I think if you look towards the end of his movies, I think it is in Octopussy, I think, he has a watch that actually has a laser in it. It becomes incredibly ridiculous towards the end of his era. But if you love gadgets, you're going to love Roger Moore's Bonds.
And I have to say, the thing I love about the gadgets is not so much the gadgets themselves, but Q.
Morning, Q.
Morning, 007. This way, please.
Having Q be able to come on and kind of with this tone of like, oh, you have no respect for me, you're going to just demolish my gadgets in the field, but here it is, here's the best we have to offer. But seeing Desmond Llewellyn in all those Sean Connery films, that was always a real pleasure for me to see.
Now, here's something I want you to use with special care. With special care.
Everything you give me.
Treated with equal contempt. Yes, I know, but that's an underwater camera. It takes 8 pictures in rapid succession by pressing that button there.
Is that clever?
But if you can take pictures in the dark with an infrared film, yes.
I think you can see with Skyfall how they're looking to reboot now. We talked about rebooting, and in the Brosnan years they brought John Cleese in as Q, kind of lended again to this kind of like fantastically kind of over-the-top element that the movies had then. And of course now we have Ben Whishaw, which makes perfect sense. I mean, Q is seen as a geek in a sense, somebody who would like technology. He's an extremely young actor, but the chemistry that he has with Craig as well is sensational. And you can't wait to see him with him again in the next movie.
I'm your quartermaster.
You must be joking.
Author PPKS 9mm short. It's been coded to your palm print so only you can fire it. Less of a random killing machine, more of a personal statement.
Q.
007.
I thought it was a really nice contrast, the very young Q that we have now versus the older Desmond Llewellyn Q. And one thing I loved about Desmond Llewellyn's characterization of Q was sort of that old fuss budget. He's very, he takes great pride in all these gadgets and doesn't want Bond to wreck them. I just love that aspect of him.
Now, if you take the top off, you'll find a little red button. Whatever you do, don't touch it.
No, why not?
Because you'll release this section of the roof and engage and fire the passenger ejector seat. Whoosh.
Ejector seat? You're joking.
I never joke about my work, 007.
And do you have a favorite actor who played Bond?
Sean, I think, is most probably people's favourites overall, I think, because he was the first. But for me, oddly enough, it's Timothy Dalton. Not only did he love Bond, but he also brings to it, I think, the sense of Ian Fleming's character, that if you read the books, Dalton really did invest a great deal of time, and it's a shame his movies didn't work out, but from what I understand, he was offered the role in On Her Majesty's Secret Service, but he felt he was too young at 18 to take the role.
I think I'm going to have to agree with Aled, actually. Timothy Dalton's great. The other one I would probably say is, and I know this is going against years and years of saying Sean Connery was the best Bond, but Daniel Craig. His characterization is kind of similar to what Dalton did, going back to this literary Bond who was sort of the, very charismatic, very suave, but also there's this ruthlessness underneath all that. So definitely Timothy Dalton and Daniel Craig for me.
I still would have to go probably with Sean Connery. Just he's the Bond I grew up with, and I adore him in that part. He's great. And I never actually would have thought anyone could compete with him until I saw Casino Royale. I do love Daniel Craig in the role, but I do feel it is a different kind of Bond. But I am so thrilled to have survived decades of Roger Moore and Pierce Brosnan to be able to really look forward to a new Bond film. And we are looking forward to hopefully 2 more with Daniel Craig. So that'll be Bond 24 and 25. So I want to thank you both for joining me. I've had Aled Jones of Moviedrome DVD and Rami Tateishi, Assistant Professor of English and Film Studies at National University. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And Rami, maybe you can take us out with a little of Bond's theme.
That'd be my pleasure.
Thanks for listening to this Bond edition of Cinema Junkie. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or check back every week on my Cinema Junkie blog at kpbs.org/cinemajunkie. Starting Saturday, I'll be in Wales for 2 weeks for the Abertoir Horror Film Festival, and I hope to send some podcasts from across the pond. So till our next film fix, I'm Beth Accomando, your resident cinema junkie.
KPBS On Demand is supported by Paint Care, offering households and businesses in California more than 800 leftover paint drop-off sites for recycling. Quantities of 100-plus gallons of paint may qualify for a large volume pickup. Learn more at paintcare.org.